What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Game Time Discussions. I'm Cameron Selby here with Emery Cuzzy. Today, we're going to be optimistic. We're going to talk about the 10 players that we love at their ADP going on right now. Obviously, we're referring majority to DraftKings and Underdog because those are the sharpest ADPs out there right now. Everybody's investing their money into them. There's not as many robots picking for people. It's hard to go off of ESPN, Yahoo, Sleeper, etc. right now because just there's so much auto drafting and it's a little early in the game, but we're heading into July. We'll start referencing those more and more in our videos as we go forward. But yeah, we're going to kick it off. Jermaine Burton going about 160, 150, wide receiver 66 on both platforms. We have him just as wide receiver 64 as well, but we love him for the reason of if Joe Burrow is back, he knows and loves to pepper his receivers.
Right. We keep mentioning the fact that he's had 3 receivers that have been top 50. Tyler Boyd, and then both, of course, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. So why can't Jermaine Burton step into the same role and become the guy that gets top 50? We have him at wide receiver 64. Of course, we're higher regular rank wise, but there are a lot of good receivers. So of course he didn't make it into the top 50, but he has upside to be a top 45 receiver, and we're getting him in, the the 16th, 17th round.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So essentially, each of the last 2 years, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins have both had injury issues to deal with, out a couple weeks or what have you. And Tyler Boyd stepped right in, and all of those weeks, he was a top 30 receiver every single week. That he was playing, and had even higher upside to be a wide receiver 1 in those particular weeks. And when you're getting into drafting your wide receiver 6s and 7s, you just need 4 or 5 weeks. And on top of that, we want to talk about the volume because Tyler Boyd never in the Joe Burrow era was below wide receiver 46. That was also with 300 touch a year Joe Mixon in the backfield. They replaced him with Zach Moss. Whether you believe Zach Moss or Chase Brown is the more running back to target this year, that's on you. But either way, neither of them are going to be 300 touch guys.
Right.
So that just opens up even more in the passing volume. Jermaine Burton he missed his Alabama trio years where they had Heisman quarterbacks that were just high volume passing offenses, and he was basically in a terrible wide receiver group that didn't really because of that ran a lot more, so it just didn't really fit what he was capable of. And you're telling me having T. Higgins and Jamar Chase on the outsides that he can't just be peppered with the fourth look options, having 4, 5, 6 targets in peak weeks.
Well, I mean, and if you look at it, like you're talking about college years, but like there was no Tua, there was no Mac Jones, there was no Jalen Hurts. It was Jalen Milroe, who's a running quarterback. Style is very different than any of the other guys that we just said. And the other best receiver was Isaiah Bond, and he's now a UT Longhorn. But it was a completely different offense, completely different style. We thought this was probably the worst team Alabama had, especially offensively, in a long time. But Jermaine Burton, if you look at his stats, he had by far the highest yards per reception at over 20 yards per reception. So he's a big play type of threat, very fast guy. And he was a guy that, we had in our top 15, don't overlook type of guy. And he's going at a reasonable price tag for the offense that he's in for volume for sure. So, first rookie on that side. And then the next rookie is a guy that look guys, we're going to give y'all gems, of course, but there's certain guys that have opportunities to do things that you're just not going to get the ability to do in the 12th, 13th round. And this guy in Kimani Vidal was going in the 15th, 16th round. He's just going to climb. All you need to do is click his name in the 13th, 14th round before anybody else can, and you're going to be very happy because he is playing behind. If you look at a regular depth chart, he's behind J.K. Dobbins, who will not be starting this season. That is just a fact of it. It is what it is. JK has had too many injuries. We love JK.
He could be cut for
yeah.
all we know.
And then Gus Edwards, who has had similar injuries. He's actually had very bad injuries, and we're just automatically putting him as the 1A. I'm just not there because explosiveness, ability to take the touches, like you got to think there's certain guys that have never had 300 plus rushing touches. Well, Kimani Vidal has, and he was really productive with his. He had 1,800 plus yards in college.
Yeah, I mean, like I have his stats up right now, and obviously it's not an instant translating to the NFL, but I do know that Austin Eckler came out. Again, I've relayed this before. He left primarily because Jim Harbaugh wants somebody to have 300 touches.
Right.
And Gus Edwards has never had that workload in 6-7 years in the NFL. Kimani Vidal was one of the leading touch leaders in the college football last year, had 315 touches. And he had 1,862 yards, 15 touchdowns, 6 yards a touch.
Yeah.
Incredible. Obviously, that was at Troy. But running back production, if you're behind a good offensive line or has a ton of volume, it's just very interchangeable. And to me, he's the easiest click right now and easiest guy I can condone drafting around early because I know where he's going.
Right.
Because Gus Edwards has missed time in OTAs. He's been getting all the reps with the ones. J.K. Dobbins hasn't been there yet. He's been getting all the reps. Him and Isaiah Spiller. Yeah, I was going to say CJ Spiller. But
Isaiah Davis, right?
No, it's Isaiah Spiller from A&M.
Is he the one that's getting the touches right now?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Him and Kimani.
Okay.
So, and we've seen Isaiah Spiller. We drafted him as like a late round pick when he was a rookie, and he was beat out by other guys. And so I just don't view that as huge competition right now. So we're clicking him every time in the 13th round. He's going to rise.
He'll be ahead of that possibly.
If we get to training camp and he's getting as many or any kind of 1 reps away from Gus Edwards, he's going to rise and rise and rise. And we're basically saying, because we made this ranking and we put him at running back 41 when he was like RB 55, 56 for everybody. And in just 1 week, he's up to RB 47.
Yeah.
So he is rising very fast. And unlike somebody like Jaleel McLaughlin, who's on a bad team, and he actually hasn't not established, but Javonte Williams, former 2nd round pick that has been productive in fantasy before.
Yeah.
And people are trying to justify putting him before. Gus Edwards has always been a backup running back that occasionally comes in and has okay games, but touchdown dependent, doesn't have much in the receiving game.
Right.
And there's just opportunity. Jim Harbaugh wants to lead the league in, time of possession, running back touches.
Right.
And that's just the exact situation you want to target for a late round running back.
Yeah, he's the guy that we probably will have 50% of, and that's scary because you're never supposed to have 50% of anybody, but it's like at this point where he's going, what he's capable of touches and going for, you just have to get him. And he's 125th on our board, but that's probably feels a little low even, but we just couldn't justify putting him so far over ADP.
We think we get the point when we're 30 spots ahead of ADP.
Yeah.
That you understand. But
exactly.
We know where he's going, and we're still, if he does rise to 125, we're still going to click his name.
Exactly.
Whereas other guys, like we said, Braylon Allen, we were drafting the hell out of because he was, going undrafted, and he goes viral because of his pick. And then now he's a 17th round pick, and we're just like, we got enough. So we can probably tail off of him for a little while because we know he's a true handcuff. Mania Vidal has opportunity for starting running back touches to begin the year, let alone
week
in the year. And so we're more than fine to click on him as RB4 or even RB5 right now.
And then the next guy is Ezekiel Elliott getting re-signed with Dallas. We kind of know what we're getting with Zeke. He's the back that's probably going to score the touchdowns in their offense. And, we've had this conversation, but like Zeke was actually really productive last year, especially in the end of the year when he was the starter for 5 games from week 12 to week 17. He, played all 17 weeks. He's older, but he's going to get the important touches, and that's what you keep harping on about him. Is why we keep, that's what you keep telling me about him. The important touches are the things that matter, and those are the touchdowns. Those are the the first down rushes and things like that. They're going to go to him, and they're going to hope that Rico Dowdle can take a space like Tony Pollard did when he was there. So
yeah, I mean, Dallas was the number 1 scoring offense last year, and we completely agree. They will probably take a step back from that, but they're not going to just completely fall off the map, especially with their schedule to end the season. Very reasonable, possible high scoring games throughout, and Zeke is not coming back to just see goal line work to Rico Dowdle.
right.
That is just not happening. If they sign somebody else, like a Dalvin Cook or Kareem Hunt, or trade for Khalil Herbert, or another disgruntled running back that's just kind of in a committee,
Mm-hmm.
my stance changes. But if the running back room stays as it is, yeah, Rico may rival having as many all-purpose yards because he'll be ideally the pass-catching back and between the 20s. But the important touches, I think, will be going to Zeke if he's coming back. And right now, he's going, as RB40 essentially, even worse in redraft. And we just think it's a little low. That doesn't mean that we're solely high on him, but his 6-week sample size when Ramondre went down last year, he was RB13,
Mm-hmm.
RB11, getting 7-8 targets a game, and obviously they had to do that, and that's not usually in his bag. But if you're telling me when he can average less than 3 yards a carry, and he's high-end RB2 upside, imagine going to Dallas, who obviously this is one of their worst lines that they've had, but they still have 2 all-pro guards, and it's still above average.
Right. Well, I wanted to say, he was in the 130s. So he's going up. He's at 127 for both DraftKings Underdog, but he was in the 130s and he's moving up.
Compared to Kimani Vidal, I don't know. Like Kimani, I could see rising all the way to the top 100. I don't see him rising more than where he's at right now, or a ton more. Maybe another round.
Yeah,
but he's probably going to be a 10th rounder later throughout this whole summer, and he might have separated a full round because him and Rico Dowdle were basically right neck and neck, similar to Najee and Jalen Warren, where it's just like nobody's getting both. They're just picking one. Whereas, maybe they're a couple of rounds later, but that was the situation. Now he's kind of spread a little bit,
right?
About a round and a half of him. But yeah, we like him at his ADP right now.
Yeah. And then another guy that we're much higher on than consensus, I feel like, is Trevor Lawrence. Everybody wants to buy. This is us buying the dip. Truly. Like, this is what we're doing. And Trevor Lawrence is a very talented football player, and everybody wants to give him a lot of flack. But you're going to pull up the stats from the first 9 weeks here in a second and tell us all about it, because when he was good this last year, first 10 weeks before he got his weird little injuries that were nagging, they were winning the AFC South.
They were on pace to be the 1 seed.
Yeah. And then he fell apart. Yeah, and then he fell apart. And the whole team truly fell apart. And so I know that the 15 interceptions is a little annoying and scary, but at the same time, it's like he's a guy that can produce at a very high level. And now and I like his receiving core.
Yeah. Honestly, last year was truly his worst year. I'm not going to pull up, the first half of the season because he wasn't that productive. To begin with, he was a bust last year based on his ADP, where he was going in 6th, 7th round. Essentially, the year before, when he had a fully healthy season, he was QB7.
Right.
And so he has mid-tier QB1 upside. He has multi-rushing touchdown upside. We've seen multiple games of him having 2 QB sneaks and all that stuff. So,
yeah,
really, he just had an all-around down year last year. The receiving core, essentially, I would say remain neutral. Zay Jones for Gabe Davis is a pick'em. And then Calvin Ridley was a frustrating wide receiver 1 last year that ended up being a wide receiver 2 based on overall production. But, substituting him for Brian Thomas, having Christian Kirk, ideally a fully healthy season. Evan Ingram was the 2nd highest tight end reception production ever.
All time, yeah.
And then you got to look at Travis Etienne, who's a top 5 running back and has 300 touch upside. So there's weapons all around. I think there's less pressure. Whereas Calvin Ridley, they traded for him. They were trying to force targets in certain spots. Whereas you bring in Brian Thomas Jr., you can organically
Just play the
he's
field.
not going to be upset throwing 4 targets to him early on or on occasion. And Christian Kirk is just a real ideal fit for him
Right.
as a passer. And him getting back to 4,000 yards, his 25 touchdowns, bringing down the turnovers he needs to work on. And then rushing touchdown wise, he definitely can get back to the 6 to 7 range, which we're typically accustomed to seeing.
Right, of course. And then and also, he's easy to stack, as we keep saying. That's something you can always look for. Another guy that we love is Brock Bowers. We have him at tight end 8. He's going at tight end 11. And we really love all the tight ends. Let's just be very honest, in the top 11, not necessarily where ADP is, but we love all of them as players. And Brock Bowers is the discount because he's the rookie. He's the guy that has to be the ball's being thrown by Gardner Minshew, and we're not sure how that's going to go. Of course, in Oakland, in Las Vegas, and so people want to worry about it, but no one should worry when you have the best tight end prospect of all time. Like, he is the best tight end prospect we've ever seen. He's good at everything. He's going to be on the field, even knowing they just drafted a tight end last year. It's just he's going a little bit too low for our liking, about 20 spots. And in redraft, I think he's even lower.
Yeah, I mean, he stepped down to the field as a true freshman for a national championship-led team that had 5-star recruits everywhere. And he had 15 touchdowns or 14 touchdowns, 900 all-purpose yards. He has end arounds. He's got basically 14 yards a touch as a tight end, which is incredible. He's got actual sneaky breakaway speed.
Mm-hmm.
And he has just really solid work that really there's not many tight ends that could be goal line threats as both a running back and a tight end.
Right.
And so, yeah, we love him. He dealt with some injuries last year, so that was his worst productive year out of every single all 3 years he was in Georgia, but still had 7 touchdowns, 750 yards, 13 yards a touch.
Impressive. It's just impressive.
It's impressive, and it's just because he's going to the Raiders that people don't love him, but we're drafting him the majority of the time as a tight end too.
Yeah.
So we don't need him to be throughout the year just the most productive tight end. But there's going to be some weeks where, because we draft him with Evan Ingram a lot, or Dalton Kincaid, or George Kittle, Jake Ferguson, all these guys that are really good pairings with him, that if you just have the other guy that's strong, you just need 5-6 weeks, you are going to get outperformed based on where you're drafting him right now.
Absolutely. And then I do want to just bring something up. Right now in Yahoo, in redraft,
insane.
He's 132nd. And that's behind everybody on that is above him on our list, but he's also behind Dallas Goedert. It's behind Dalton Schultz, Cole Kmet. He's basically even with TJ Hawkinson. I'm like, I will take
so insane to me. And I know that rookie tight ends typically don't produce, but the thing is, Sam Laporta produced, and now he's most people's tight end 1.
He's our tight end.
He's our tight end 1, and while that's justified, he's even better.
Oh, he's so much better. Sam Laporta was a 3rd rounder, 4th rounder.
Yeah,
it's like no.
He was a top 5 player in this class that fell all the way to 12 because 13 because everybody needed a quarterback or a receiver essentially in the first round.
There were a lot of good players in this draft class, but Brock Bowers could have been considered the number 1.
If he went fit to the Chargers, we would not consider that a reach. And on top of that, if he went to the Chargers, we would be clicking him a lot earlier than this. But it's just because he went to the Raiders that people are just a little afraid. Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid. Guy's so good.
Especially if he's your tight end 2.
Yeah.
If he's your tight end 1 and you're a little uncomfortable looking for inconsistencies possibly, sure, go 3 tight end build. But I feel very, very safe if he's my tight end 2 and we're going to tight end build.
Yeah.
you will not be disappointed. I can promise you that.
Yeah. And then going up to JSN, he's in the Seattle three-headed monster over there with DK and Tyler Lockett. We just kind of, when you pay DK an extension and then you draft JSN, it feels like Tyler Lockett's kind of the odd guy out. He's starting to get, pushed out of the system. They're going to play a lot more three receiver sets than last year. New coaching staff. The coach from Washington who had a three receiver set basically the whole time they were on the field last year at Washington because they had three legit receivers all drafted in this last draft class. I would just expect JSN to make huge steps forward, and you're really not paying anything for it. If you're getting him in the end of the 8th round, early 9th round, like you should be jumping with joy. And we've been clicking his name a lot because of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting because his style of play is more suited for PPR leagues, and he's actually going 2 full rounds lower on DraftKings.
Right
now on Underdog, he's starting to kind of dip a little bit into the 80s. I've seen he's not being drafted as high, so maybe that'll even out to where they kind of meet in the middle at 90.
Mm-hmm.
But still, I don't know if I can trust, again, I've said this before, Geno Smith making it the full season, but Sam Howell and his sample size trailing from behind a lot with Washington led the league in passing yards for the first 2 months. They're both capable of either quarterback producing with DK and JSN or Tyler Lockett if you wanted to go that route as well, because he's going outside the top 50 wide receivers as well. But Tyler Lockett's 32. He's getting up there in age. There's only been 6 receivers ever to have a 1,000-yard season, 32 or older, and I don't anticipate Tyler Lockett to be one of them. JSN is really good, guys. Like he
was the number 1 guy in his draft class.
He had an underwhelming, junior season because he was injured because of an ankle injury, very minor, and then he last year, was dealing with nagging stuff, and then he hurt his wrist. And then he was kind of banged up. And on top of that, he didn't run a ton of 3 receiver sets. And the 2 receiver sets, Tyler Lockett was more so the guy that was out on the field. I would anticipate that to flip at the very least to where he'll get about 80-90% of the snaps. And on top of that, he's just going to be a more reliable target this year. Really, he started coming into his own the back half of the season. His touchdown production was low. But we're somebody that we're taking a stand on for sure, especially on DraftKings where he's going. And he's going even worse on redraft as well.
Right. And I was going to say, he was wide receiver 48 last year, and that's where he's getting drafted.
Yeah,
and he's
exactly. So they're basically saying there's no improvement.
Exactly. And that's not even kind of the case in my eyes. So, get some JSN for sure. And then a guy that, we love on this channel, of course. And so you get Joe Burrow. He's got a slew of receivers every year. No rushing upside. That's okay, though, because he could be the guy that, flirts with 4,500 passing yards. And you're not surprised by that in any way. I mean, as long as he's healthy and is playing somewhat well, I mean, he should play better than 15.3 fantasy points per game. That's just not really what we expect from him. We should expect, 21 fantasy points per game, multi-touchdown games, and they got worse at running back. So I don't expect them to give the ball as much on the goal line. And they love setting up Jamar Chase to score touchdowns. And I love getting Jamar Chase in my best balls. So let's get some Joe Burrow too.
So what's interesting about him, right? If we're talking QB rank, we have him as QB6, which is higher than everybody else, but everybody else has him at 7 or 8. So that's not a big difference, right?
Right.
But you go over to the ADP.
Big difference.
Big difference. We have him as 59 overall. Again, QB6. And essentially redraft right in the same boat, 59, 61, 65. But best ball, 2+ rounds later than that. And essentially, we've said it before about AFC North has hardest strength of schedules, right? Baltimore, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh, all in the top 5 of hardest strength of schedules. Pittsburgh's just got a gauntlet to end the year. Cleveland is just gauntlet throughout. And then Baltimore, they've got a ton of playoff teams they got to play as well. Cincinnati's in the middle of the pack.
Yeah.
So even though middle of the pack schedule is not, an ideal thing to boast about and say, oh, they got a great strength of schedule, the fact is it's not nearly as hard as the others in their division. And I think because 2 of the last 3 years he's dealt with injuries, people are trying to put a label on him of injury proneness, especially last year going, non-contact rollout injury. That's what really hampered him. And again, we've said before, when Cooper Kupp got hurt, even though he started to drop a little bit, we were just like, we're not touching him. It's not worth it. I didn't necessarily say the same thing when Joe Burrow went down, because I was like,
he's a quarterback too. It's a little different.
Yeah, it's a little different when he's a quarterback, but also it took him a while to get going, and he started to hit his stride. And then on a touchdown pass, he just ripped his wrist, basically.
Right.
It's kind of an unprecedented injury, just from the standpoint of there's not a huge sample size, and how quickly the turnaround can be, because how Achilles injuries, it takes about a year and a half to really truly be 100%. ACL injuries, you don't want to target running backs the year after, but the following year is when they really get back to form. Don't really know with the wrist injury, and that's completely understandable if you wanted to have that as a concern. But we have a lot of Joe Burrow based on where he's going, because Jordan Love and Dak and are getting some love in that range, and he usually is the one that's going past his ADP.
Right.
And like I had him the other day, and I went with Jamar Chase in the top 5 wherever I had him, and then I went T Higgins because I haven't had enough of him yet, and he's going reasonable. And then I think it was around the 70th pick, and his ADP is like 82, and I wasn't going to be able to pick him until like 95 if I passed on him in this one. And I was like, I'm going to take the chance.
Yeah.
And he fell to me.
Right, because no one else wanted to.
Nobody else
take
wanted
him because they didn't have a stack.
I took the Chase and the Higgins. There's no tight end that's fantasy relevant really in these best ball drafts, and then Jermaine Burton, obviously way back there, so nobody wanted him, and those kinds of moves work out. Obviously in redraft it'll be a little different, but yeah, we love him in best ball right now.
Yeah, if you know where the funnel's going and no one can get it, like, it's a little bit more difficult for them to justify getting a player like that. Another guy that I think we really are high on, especially in PPR, and I don't think he's getting enough love. Alvin Kamara was suspended last year for a little while. Came back, was just absolutely freaking awesome. And for fantasy owners, like, he's going at RB16, RB17. And this year, of course, he's getting older, but we have him at RB12 because his upside, he had 75 receptions. Like, there are receivers that don't even come close to that. This man had 75 receptions. I think he was the second highest on his team, right?
Yeah, on his team, yes, but he led all running backs in receptions and missed 3 games.
Yeah.
Or 4 games. So the biggest thing with him was just he was even less efficient because he had less than 4 yards of carry. But you know what?
Who cares?
If you're getting catches in PPR leagues, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And then also, only 6 touchdowns last year was pretty frustrating as well.
That's okay.
They just weren't scoring much. But guess what? He was still RB3. And in points per game, he was 17.9, top 5.
Yeah.
And, he's getting older. And the thing is, his that is baked in with his ADP right now. So it's not like you're investing in Derrick Henry, who's the same age, has way more, miles on the on his
so many
tires.
more touches.
So many more touches. And Alvin Kamara hasn't had to take punishment. A lot of his is catching out 6 yards, running out of bounds.
Mm-hmm.
So that's his touches,
right,
for the most part. Again, something that we love doing right now is just Alvin Kamara and then Kendre Miller in the 12th, 13th round as a handcuff. And who knows if Kendre Miller can, eat into. There's a lot of positive buzz with him as a second-year running back that didn't really have an opportunity last year. And I don't know, because Alvin Kamara, again, he has 694 rushing yards and still was top 5 running back.
Yeah.
Like, that's just kind of what
good
what he's capable of doing. And I see other guys that are in that range, and it's just like Zamir White. I hope he can work out, but we don't know. Like, there's just a bunch of unproven guys, and the James Connors of the world, Zach Mosses, Najee Harris's, Jalen Warren's, and he's going like right at the start of that tier.
Right.
And we just think he's capable of being an RB1 still.
Yeah.
At least from a points per game perspective, especially in redraft. If you're in redraft and you're worried about him lasting the full season, there's opportunities to pick up.
Well, he's not that expensive, guys.
He's still not expensive.
He's not expensive. That's the big thing.
7th, 8th round.
Yeah,
right now.
It's crazy. Like if he was where we have him in the 44th, we would be, that seems reasonable, and we wouldn't probably have very much of him.
Yeah, I mean,
because then
he's got a bad offensive line. They're going to be trailing from behind,
and then he's around guys like Travis Etienne and Josh Jacobs, but he's 60th. Like you're getting him at the end of the 5th round, basically, and like that's your hero RB.
And that's
that's your
and he's dropping RB. From there too. Like it's not like that's kind of where he's risen. And
right.
Underdog, for a good reason, he's a whole round later, but it's dropping more. It's not even getting, so it's going in the opposite direction of where we go, where we have him now. And again, it's where you can get the value. So if he was a top 50 pick, we would have way less of him. But it's just like we're going hero RB, and you're telling me my RB2 can be Alvin Kamara while I have 4 great receivers to lean on? Sign me up.
Absolutely. So, and then getting to Keenan Allen, a guy that we click on basically constantly. We are having a hard time seeing the big difference between DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, because at the end of the day, like Keenan Allen was super productive last year with the Chargers, and everybody's a new receiver to Caleb Williams. It's not like, he's moving to a new team and they already have an established guy. Like, yeah, DJ Moore's established, but it wasn't with Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams hasn't decided who his favorite receiver is yet. Keenan Allen, a little bit older, but at the same time, like, we only have him 15, 16 spots above ADP, and we're clicking him basically every time in the 4th, 5th round.
Yeah, I mean, he had 21.5 points per game last year. That's above Amon-Ra St. Brown and JJ and Jamar Chase. And that, I'm just talking points per game. I'm not saying overall fantasy points. Obviously, some of them dealt with injuries. He did too. And he still outproduced. And obviously, that was with Justin Herbert as well. But Caleb Williams, I don't expect just slinging it.
Right.
And the style of play that DJ Moore is, it's over the top. It's 4 for 80 and a touchdown. That's his upside. Keenan Allen's is volume. And I just don't see him being traded for and walking in and just getting 5 targets a game, 6 targets a game. And obviously, he's still going in the 5th round. It's not like he's just crazy discount compared to like Alvin Kamara that we're seeing, especially with there's so many good receivers around him as well. He's right in the middle of the tier that we have him in. But we just think the gap between him and DJ Moore is not nearly as high as other people view it. We actually feel like this might be a little too low of his wide receiver rank, or DJ Moore's wide receiver 18 rank is too high. But they're both reasonable wide receiver 2-esque players on your team, and you're getting him as a wide receiver 3, or if you win a hero or a 0 RB, you can get him as their 4th receiver.
Yeah.
Like, it's something that we really like diving into right now, especially the way we're constructing our rosters.
Yeah, he had 108 receptions in 13 games. That is an insane amount of receptions, man. And he's a guy that just kind of plays a style that doesn't age that badly. Like he continues to make those things happen because he is really the intermediate short guy. Plays out of the slot, does a really good job in there. And he always knows how to get open. He's very veteran savvy. So I think he should be higher.
Yeah, all of his negatives are baked into his price, and that's why we like him where he's going right now.
Absolutely. And then the last guy is a guy that we've talked about 100 times on this podcast. He is 400 fantasy points per game upside. And I mean not per game, sorry. 400 per season. That's ridiculous. And he's been QB1 3 years in a row, and 15 rushing touchdowns. Like, come on, man. 15 rushing touchdowns. Like, he's stealing every touchdown, basically. 29 and 15, 44 touchdowns for him this last year. 4,300 passing yards. Like, I know that they got worse offensively, but there are some guys that are kind of, just make it happen and just know how to do it. And he's just such a good competitor. I love him as a player, and Josh Allen is one of the best football players in the league, and we're getting the discount because he doesn't have his receivers right now.
He has been absolutely incredible. In the last 4 years, his worst season was 389 fantasy points. That would have been QB1 last year, beating himself. Like, he has been absolutely phenomenal every season, and the problem is, it's just his receivers are gone, but that just means more rushing upside. He's still safest bet, or one of the safest bets to lead quarterbacks in rushing touchdowns. I don't think he's ever going to be a 1,000-yard threat, but he's going to be the goal line threat. James Cook is not going to vulture touchdowns from him. It's going to be the other way around. And on top of that, even though I expect him to not throw for 4,300 yards and 30 passing touchdowns, I don't know if I expect him to have 20 interceptions.
Right.
I think the passing volume will go down, but the rushing production is going to stay the same. And even if it does, man, he had a gap of, 3 fantasy points a game essentially on the next best guy last year. And so that's kind of baking into it. And his ADP has dropped about 15, 16 spots from where he was going last year. He was in the top 20 last year with Patrick Mahomes, who another guy that we love as well. And they're just both kind of going low, and going hero quarterback and them staying healthy has worked. And if you're telling me that is working and you're also getting him in the 3rd, 4th round, like, go ahead.
Please.
Like, we're getting a ton of him right now just because we don't have to invest a 2nd-round pick in a person that should probably be going in the 2nd round.
And if you do pick him, you can stack him later, and you can find ways to stack him because you don't really know who their guy's going to be.
Like, if you don't want to go Keon Coleman in the 7th round, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir there, Dalton Kincaid is somebody that is like one of our 3 highest exposed tight ends because he's just in a tier of 5th round tight ends that we love that could flirt with 1,000 yards. And then Chase Claypool, dart throw.
Yeah, why not? 20th rounder.
Dawson Knox, dart throw. Why not? Like, there's so many ways to just fall in love with this pick. Just don't overthink it. And if you don't like him, the same tier 1 quarterbacks are all going right behind him after that. Like, he just starts a run of consecutive quarterbacks, and he's just been so much better than them from a fantasy perspective for 4 straight years now.
Yep, and he will most likely continue if he has this type of rushing upside. I don't expect 15 rushing touchdowns. Like, let's just bring it back a little bit, but at the same time, I can write the narrative that he could have more in rushing touchdowns. So it's like, I want to say he'll probably have 12, but if he had 17, it wouldn't surprise me. Like, they don't have like a power back. He is a power back, truly.
Yeah, I think health is the only way that he is not a top 3 quarterback next year, and that's in spite of a bad receiving core.
Exactly. But yeah, that is actually our last guy on our list, though. That's one way to end it, to pick him the best guy on his respective position. But and he's ranked number 1 throughout all platforms. He's number 1. It is what it is. But we appreciate y'all coming and hanging out with us. Go like, comment, subscribe. Click on our other videos. We just put out a video of the most hated ADPs that we have. We're gonna come out with some videos coming up about guys we want more of. These are the guys we love. We're getting a lot of them, but there's some other guys that we love and we're not getting a lot of them. So we're gonna put those videos out soon. We'll of course continue our best ball live streams every Wednesday or Thursday, and you just kind of keep looking out for that. We love y'all coming and commenting in there for sure too.
Yeah, can't thank you enough for hanging out with us. Do all the things that Emery said because he's a smart man. I also want to know who is the guys that you love at ADP. Who are you getting the most exposure to? We just put out a tweet the other day for both of our highest exposures at each position. Guys like JSN and other guys on this list that we just have a ton of. Who are the guys that you're getting a ton of right now as you're getting into best ball and where the ADPs are sliding out? Because right now this is like the last week or so before training camp start, and then we're going to start seeing actual news come out, and that'll start really affecting stuff. So before that, who were you getting a ton of, and who did you get a stand on that just you're going to be very happy about going forward?
Absolutely. So get in the comments and go check out our other socials, and we will see y'all next time.